The night deepens, the lights begin to flicker, and the wonderful nightlife unfolds. Wolf-like cries echoed from the large hall of Dream Bar, attracting countless passers-by. Colorful balls of light swayed, adding rhythm to the dim dance floor. On stage, a beautiful woman in a green chiffon dress is dancing passionately. Elena Rivers's long, wavy-like curly hair falls freely on her shoulders, following each graceful dance of Elena Rivers, evoking her captivating curves. There was a strange scent in the air, gently spreading, almost impossible to smell. Every move of the woman was extremely beautiful, every look was in the right place, it could be said to have attracted countless looks. Below the stage, all kinds of men stood crowded into the 3 inner and outer 3 floors, their eyes fixed on Elena Rivers. Following each dance of Elena Rivers, their eyes were glued to the woman's green chiffon dress, causing everyone's eyes to stop on her dance. Many people have long imagined in their minds what it would be like to have such a beautiful woman, making many people swallow their saliva. This Elena Rivers is truly the best among women. Not only is her figure perfect, but her small face is even more beautiful, like a fairy. The slim waist, the long white legs, the whole body has nothing that people can't take their eyes off of. Elena Rivers smiled, as bright as a peach blossom, her beautiful and long narrow phoenix eyes were touching, her amorous eyes swept over everyone on stage, but the bottom of her eyes flashed with contempt and mockery. On the wall opposite the stage, the clock read exactly 8:50. In 10 minutes, that person will arrive. Elena Rivers stopped dancing, walked down the stage, pushed through the crowd, refused a man's nth invitation, and finally succeeded in sitting down in front of the bar. 8:57 a.m., Elena Rivers pursed her lips and smiled. It really took no effort to deal with such a rigid person. That man named Maxwell Gray, it only took her 2 days to understand his schedule. At 8:59 a.m., Elena Rivers ordered a glass of Blue Ocean with the barman, her eyes sparkling toward the door. Sure enough, a tall, straight figure appeared in her sight. As soon as he appeared, his handsome face immediately attracted the attention of many single girls. That man was tall, handsome, with a wicked smile on the corner of his lips, truly captivating. Elena Rivers took the glass of wine from the waiter's hand, stood up, and walked towards the goal of this trip. In fact, this man was inherently a boring person. If it was a normal day, she probably wouldn't pay attention to him. Striding on 10-centimeter high heels, Elena Rivers walked with style, a heartwarming spring smile on the corners of her lips. Maxwell Gray glanced at him. He came here to find fun, naturally he had to see if there was anyone in the bar he liked tonight or not. He naturally saw Elena Rivers' appearance at first sight. It's just that Elena Rivers has a lot of light in her eyes, she looks very smart and clever. Elena Rivers is like that, he really doesn't want to get involved. Too smart, it will be very difficult to escape. Elena Rivers gradually approached, Maxwell Gray leaned slightly to get out of the way. Unexpectedly, it seemed that the heel was too high, causing Elena Rivers to twist her foot and fall straight into Maxwell Gray's lap. Maxwell Gray originally wanted to dodge, but for some reason he couldn't move, letting Elena Rivers fall into his arms. A glass of wine spilled on his snow-white shirt, instantly soiling a large area. Sorry. Elena Rivers quickly stood up and quickly apologized. Maxwell Gray frowned slightly. Although his eyes were a little unhappy, he still maintained his demeanor. It's okay, it's good that the beauty didn't fall. Elena Rivers raised her head and smiled, the innocence in her eyes startled Maxwell Gray. Your clothes are dirty, come to my house, take them off and I'll wash them for you. This is an invitation. Having been around this place for so long, with such illusions, Maxwell Gray is very familiar. No need, just a set of clothes. The bland refusal did not dampen Elena Rivers' enthusiasm. She took a step forward, almost sticking close to Maxwell Gray's body, her long, white fingers slowly brushing the dirty shirt on his chest. What if, it's not just clothes? Such frankness, Maxwell Gray would be an idiot if he didn't understand. But his intuition told him that this woman was very dangerous, so Maxwell Gray just kept his cool and stood aside. Elena Rivers smiled charmingly, slowly brought her head to Maxwell Gray's ear, as if accidentally snapping her fingers to brush away a speck of dust on his shoulder. A pitiful cry made her arch her eyebrows. "I'm not a snake beauty either, why do you need to be so afraid?" Elena Rivers blew air into her ears, the faint scent permeating her nose, making Maxwell Gray's mind heat up. Feeling the sword-like gazes of the women around her, Elena Rivers smiled like a blooming flower. "It seems that in this bar, I am not the only one who cares about you, but besides me, who else can be worthy, with you?" Maxwell Gray was a bit thoughtful. Elena Rivers was telling the truth. Although there were many people in the bar, no one could compare to her. But, Maxwell Gray did not want to take risks. There was something on this Elena Rivers that made him feel dangerous. "Sorry, I just came here to drink." Maxwell Gray gently refused and turned around to leave. Elena Rivers took 2 steps forward, directly hugged his waist, burying her face in his back. "It's just a one-night stand, after waking up we won't have anything to do with each other. I don't want to bring trouble on myself. Looks like you're also a smart person." After saying this, Elena Rivers let go of Maxwell Gray, turned around and left the bar. Behind her, Maxwell Gray stared at the place she left. After a long time, the corner of his lips curled into a confident smile, his footsteps chasing after her. The pitch-black night was torn apart by many gaps in neon lights. The hot air gradually cooled down near midnight. The night wind blew and was still a bit chilly. When Maxwell Gray chased her out, Elena Rivers was standing under the tall sycamore tree, looking up at the canopy, with a gentle, sweet smile on her face. A moment later, she bowed her head, met Maxwell Gray's gaze and waved, "Hurry up." Maxwell Gray was stunned and walked quickly forward. When he was about to approach Elena Rivers raised her hand and threw him a bunch of keys. "Drive, I don't know how to drive." Not far away, a fiery red sports car parked on the side of the road, extremely prominent in the dark night. Maxwell Gray smiled, without exposing himself, took the key and opened the door. "Go over and open the passenger door," leaning against the door invitingly. Elena Rivers smiled and curled her eyes again, running quickly. The sports car glowed on the dark night road, speeding away. The car stopped at the most luxurious hotel in the city. The doorman walked over to open the car door, and took Maxwell Gray's key to park the car. Maxwell Gray held Elena Rivers' hand into the lobby, got a room at the front desk, and held Elena Rivers' hand upstairs. In the elevator, Elena Rivers glanced at the tall figure next to her and moved her fingers slightly. The elevator door had not yet opened and a passionate kiss had already arrived. It seemed like he couldn't wait any longer. Maxwell Gray lifted Elena Rivers' chin and kissed her hard. Hot breath blew on Elena Rivers' face, making her blush slightly. The two of them hugged and kissed each other as they exited the elevator, rolled around in the hallway, and finally reached the door. Room. Maxwell Gray took the room card and opened the door, pulling Elena Rivers close to the door. "Turn around, kick hard with your heel," and the door slammed shut. The two kept hugging and kissing, stumbling from the door into the living room and then into the bedroom, finally falling onto the king-sized bed. Under her tall body, Elena Rivers became even more petite and graceful. Maxwell Gray's eyes lowered, a hot kiss was imprinted on Elena Rivers' neck. Elena Rivers was as passionate as fire, her arms around Maxwell Gray's neck, enjoying the joy, her expression passionate, but her eyes were unusually cold. His face was dark, his face was gloomy, 3 meters of black energy swirled around the top of his head. This man was indeed surrounded by filth. Elena Rivers silently judged in her heart, and at the same time used her fingertips to draw a spell on Maxwell Gray's back. Ordinary people would not be able to detect that Elena Rivers was traveling under her fingertips, drawing layers upon layers of spells on his body. But Maxwell Gray right now is no ordinary person. His dark eyes suddenly awakened. Maxwell Gray almost immediately flew back out as soon as Elena Rivers finished drawing the spell, his slim body suspended in midair, cold eyes looking at the still passionate Elena Rivers. In bed. Who are you? Maxwell Gray's voice was low, his eyes were unkind. Ever since he was at the bar, he felt that Elena Rivers was unusual. He didn't expect her to know magic. Looking at her, she didn't look like the poaching demon master. Although her body had a faint demonic aura, there was a mysterious aura that made it impossible to distinguish what it was. Elena Rivers smiled lazily, turned around and changed to a more comfortable lying position, one hand propped her head up and looked at the man floating in midair, but the bottom of her eyes was clearly another person, ignorant of the morality of the two worlds, committing evil. In this human world, the crime is worthless. As soon as Elena Rivers finished speaking, a trace of black gas emitted from Maxwell Gray's body. The black gas continuously poured out from Maxwell Gray's body, gradually entwining and condensing into a human shape. And Maxwell Gray, who was originally floating in midair, suddenly fell to the carpet. Elena Rivers raised her eyes to look, and the figure condensed by the black gas gradually became clear, and it was a beautiful person who was difficult to distinguish between male and female. His eyebrows are like a painting, his face is like a jade, extremely soft. Wearing a white shirt, black hair flying, floating in midair. That person's face was extremely unsightly, fiercely looking at Elena Rivers lying lazily on the bed. Her 10 fingers suddenly grew several inches long, the fingertips were sharp, as if ready to tear apart the fragile woman on the bed. Into pieces. Elena Rivers sat up, glared at the other person. Do you still want to hurt people? Let's see how this lady deals with you. With her fingers continuously moving, Elena Rivers continuously shot out several green light beams, divided into 3 lines, top, middle, and bottom, aiming straight at the vital points all over that person's body. The person seemed panicked, his sleeves waving like the wind, only then was he reluctant to neutralize Elena Rivers's magic. Elena Rivers chuckled as the ball of blue light popped out, and a long blue whip suddenly appeared in her hand. She swung her wrist, and the whip caught the unconscious Maxwell Gray on the carpet, gently carrying him to the bed. With a wave of his left hand, the silk blanket automatically covered Maxwell Gray's body. That person seemed extremely afraid of Elena Rivers. While she was taking care of Maxwell Gray, he turned into black smoke and escaped through the window. After arranging for Maxwell Gray, Elena Rivers smiled coldly. She wanted to see how far he could escape. A blue light followed the black smoke and rushed out the window, leaving only a quiet VIP room. No one knows what happened here, even Maxwell Gray, who is unconscious in bed, is unaware. Elena Rivers turned into blue light and chased the black smoke in the air for miles, until she reached a deserted park on the outskirts of the city, blocking the black smoke. The two of them fought in their true forms. Less than half a moment later, Elena Rivers coldly looked at the person who was tied up by her whip and couldn't move. She softly opened her lips and said, with just this little cultivation level, she dares to escape. Hell, do evil in the human world. Today I will burn you to ashes, making you disappear from this world forever. You can't do that. The person struggled violently, but this blue whip looked fragile and could not be broken free no matter how much strength he used. The person seemed to be in despair, looking at Elena Rivers' face and suddenly shedding tears. I still haven't found you, I can't disappear like that. Heaven has the virtue of loving life, I beg you to forgive me, I just want to find that person. Elena Rivers snapped her fingers, cast a spell of magic to subdue him, then retracted her whip. You have been infatuated with that person all your life, why haven't you given up yet? Even if you want to find that person, you should not arbitrarily enter the human world to disrupt order, and you should not harm living beings. There was a trace of unwillingness in Elena Rivers' eyes, but her expression was extremely cold. The man looked frightened, his face full of doubt. You know me? You, who exactly are you? Elena Rivers sighed, cultivating for thousands of years beside Nai-Ha Bridge, she had met countless unjust and deluded souls like this. Because he wanted to find the person he loved, he disregarded the laws of the underworld and arbitrarily entered the human world. This was still the first person. You are dead, forget the past things that should be forgotten. I will take you back. Underworld, leave it to Elder Yen to handle. Elena Rivers took off the tail ring on the little finger of her left hand, chanted a spell, turned the person into black smoke again, and slowly led into the ring. Waiting for the black smoke to completely enter, the originally jade green ring also turned dark black. Elena Rivers caressed the ring, sighed, being infatuated to this extent was truly rare. Well, when I return to the underworld, I will ask my grandmother for a bowl of special soup for him to drink, and by the way, ask Elder Yen for mercy. This done, Elena Rivers suddenly remembered that Maxwell Gray was still at the hotel, so she turned around on the spot, turned into blue light and disappeared. When Elena Rivers reappeared in the hotel room, Maxwell Gray remained in the same position lying on the bed, continuing to fall into a coma. Thinking of the task her grandmother had assigned her, Elena Rivers snapped her fingers and chanted the Ton Tam spell. Blue light entered Maxwell Gray's forehead, his tightly closed eyes slowly opened. The bottom of his eyes were a little absent-minded, but he suddenly regained his usual calm and indifferent look. He glanced around and saw Elena Rivers smiling next to him. Maxwell Gray sat up suspiciously, the stain on his shirt made him frown, his sharp eyes looked towards Elena Rivers. Who are you? The gentle smile stopped. Why were so many people asking about her identity tonight? My name is Elena Rivers, you brought me here. Her long, narrow phoenix eyes flashed with a cunning light. What she said was all true. Maxwell Gray frowned tightly, his right hand rubbing his slightly sore temple. Lately, strange things have been happening. Apparently he slept in the room at his villa, then woke up the next day in the hotel room. Furthermore, there are always all kinds of strange women around. Most importantly, these women would all die of various causes not long after. He was invited by the police for 10 consecutive days for questioning. Even though superiors intervened, it was just a procedural investigation. But I'm afraid that if this happens again, even if you want to interfere, you won't be able to anymore. Dozens of human lives are not easy to hide. You go, I don't need it. Maxwell Gray coldly chased people away, although this woman was more attractive than the previous women who woke up next to her. Elena Rivers smiled slightly, handed out a small bracelet. This is for you. Maxwell Gray did not accept. He could not accept things from women, let alone strange women. Thank you, no need. Lifting the blanket, Maxwell Gray slid out of bed. The strange smell and sticky feeling on his shirt made him extremely uncomfortable. His cleanliness relapsed. He just wanted to immediately take off his shirt and shower 10 times. Elena Rivers glanced at the changed Maxwell Gray, silently lamenting in her heart. If her grandmother hadn't sent her to protect this man, she wouldn't have bothered to be here looking at his cold face. Smiling like a flower, he passed the bracelet again. I'm sorry, I accidentally soiled your shirt. Maxwell Gray pushed past her hand, intending to go out. Elena Rivers was a little impatient. This bracelet is very useful, she must give it to him. Seeing that Maxwell Gray was about to leave, he couldn't use magic in an emergency, so he had to reach out to get it. Unexpectedly, Maxwell Gray just turned around to take his coat. Elena Rivers pulled it, causing Maxwell Gray to lose his balance, his whole body falling on Elena Rivers, weighing heavily on the soft bed. Maxwell Gray wanted to stand up, his arms groped for support, but unexpectedly touched something soft. He was extremely surprised. A trace of satisfaction appeared in the bottom of his eyes. The feeling was really not bad. Elena Rivers gritted her teeth, her mind instantly anemic. This man actually dared to put his hands on her. So that's it, but you still dare to show a satisfied face. This. Elena Rivers angrily pushed Maxwell Gray away. Just as she was about to stand up, Maxwell Gray pressed her back. I changed my mind. Just after a short contact, he actually has feelings for this woman. Maxwell Gray is not a gentleman, on the contrary he can be considered a cunning person. Since he's a cunning person, he naturally won't force himself to be patient. After all, people have been brought here, the room is already booked, it's a waste if they don't use it. At best, give me a little more money tomorrow and send me away. Unlike when he was hastily possessed just now, this man now had complete patience, his eyes kept stopping on the girl. Looking at the eyes of the man in front of her, Elena Rivers was stunned, a thunderclap rang out in her head. As if an electric current had descended from the sky, Elena Rivers was numb from head to toe. In her foggy mind, some vague impressions flashed past, suddenly flashed and disappeared, so quickly that she couldn't see clearly what they were. Meeting Elena Rivers for a moment, Maxwell Gray could almost hear a deep sigh of contentment. My heart. Like a heart that has been lonely for a long time, finally finding a place to anchor. He didn't have time to think about what this feeling was, because the person in front of him was so sweet, sweet to the bottom of his heart. Maxwell Gray never knew that liking a girl turned out to be such a wonderful thing, that he couldn't bear to stop. Maxwell Gray kept staring at Elena Rivers, as if he wanted to see through the girl in front of him, and the way Elena Rivers looked at him, also made his face instantly become deeper. Feeling his thoughts, Maxwell Gray was a little startled, but could not bear to let this girl suffer any harm because of his strange thoughts. Maxwell Gray clearly felt Elena Rivers trembling, it was a response to him. Maxwell Gray liked this response very much. Up until now, Elena Rivers felt like she was walking on clouds, soft, not knowing the depths. Her mind was chaotic, her consciousness could not concentrate at all. No matter how many times she chanted the Ton Tam mantra, she could not concentrate. The body felt like it was on fire, hot from head to toe. A strange heat flowed through her limbs, making her limbs weak. Deep inside there is an extreme emptiness, as if someone needs to fill it. Elena Rivers doesn't know what happened, maybe Maxwell Gray cast a spell on her. But Maxwell Gray was an ordinary person, this she knew, otherwise her grandmother would not have sent her to protect him. So what is your current reaction? Maxwell Gray grabbed Elena Rivers again. For someone with a serious cleanliness problem, this was basically impossible. But now, he did. No one noticed, the sky outside the window seemed terrifyingly black. Black clouds rolled at extremely fast speeds, as if they were about to swoop down. Each flash of lightning in the sky tore through the quiet night. There were 5 colors of light flashing from the horizon: red, orange, purple, blue, and green. The clock hands pointed to 12 o'clock, and not many people were still awake. A person wearing a black cloak stood in the pitch-black night, as if becoming one with the darkness. He slightly raised his head to look at the sky, the wind and clouds changed color, and he had a strange vision. This world, I'm afraid, can no longer be peaceful. Ghosts are reborn, demons are rampant, will heaven and earth still be at peace in the future? But, there is no way for you. This is a predestined destiny, even if thousands of lifetimes fail, he can only push these children into the abyss. I just hope they can find a glimmer of vitality. Behind him, a hunchbacked figure suddenly appeared, seemingly somewhat surprised. The white-haired old woman looked at the person hidden in the darkness in front of her and sighed heavily. What should be done, we have all done. It took thousands of years of cultivation, just to protect them for thousands of years. Let go, next is their own life. After a sigh, heaven and earth returned to peace, as if nothing had ever happened. In the hotel room, pain awakened Elena Rivers's chaotic consciousness. Before I could understand what happened, a thunderclap rang out in the sky, my ears rang, and I was so shocked that I fainted. As if his soul had finally found a place to return, Maxwell Gray, in that moment, shed another tear. Looking at the faint water mark on the back of his hand, Maxwell Gray suspiciously raised his hand, wiped the corner of his eye, and determined it was his own tears. Bending over to look at the seemingly unconscious Elena Rivers, Maxwell Gray frowned. Who is this girl anyway? I don't know how much time has passed, but Maxwell Gray has no intention of letting go of this girl. Finally, after who knows how long, Maxwell Gray roared. Sweat drenched Maxwell Gray's cheeks. Looking at Elena Rivers' fresh face, his eyes were filled with incomprehensible gentleness. He gently traced her face with his finger and felt a familiar feeling, strange, as if we had met a long time ago. It's like this is a face that's been engraved in my heart, but I've never seen it before. Letting out a sigh, Maxwell Gray gently moved Elena Rivers into a comfortable position. Pulled a thin silk sheet over both of them, embracing her fragrant body and falling asleep. Elena Rivers dreamed a long dream, a very chaotic dream. It seemed like many scenes were piled on top of each other, making her a little unable to differentiate. She could feel the dreamer's deep despair, along with boundless pain. At the end of the dream, a black long sword pierced her body. Boundless pain came, Elena Rivers almost saw herself disappear before her eyes. Are not. Elena Rivers woke up with a scream and found that she was already drenched in sweat, and her face became even colder, unable to tell whether it was sweat or tears. The body has burning pain and the limbs are tired. Elena Rivers tried to rotate her neck, waiting until her feeling was completely restored, then she discovered something unusual. Someone tell her, whose hand on her waist belongs to? And what's with her lying naked next to a man? My goodness! Did she wake up the wrong way? A long time later, Elena Rivers recovered from this shock and immediately jumped up. Something happened. Something big happened. She lost her virginity again. As a fairy, this is basically not allowed. Okay. Elena Rivers's mind was empty, completely engulfed by panic. Ah. Suddenly a light flashed in my mind, looking for my sister. Their minds were in sync. As soon as they recited the Dharma, the other big sister replied, "Fifth sister, I'm busy, you can play by yourself, I'll contact you when I'm free." Dark Emperor, don't run away, give me back my husband, me. Next was the sound of wind whistling, and then contact was cut off by Big Sister. Big Sister can't do it, there's also Second Sister. Fifth Sister, I'm inconvenient right now. Wasn't that voice just that of her cold second sister? No. She must have found the wrong one, yes, that's for sure, that person absolutely cannot be her second sister. Contact was cut off, Elena Rivers hugged her small red face and buried her head deep in the blanket. Even though the third sister doesn't suit her very well on weekdays, it should still be useful when it's important. Unwilling to recite the Dharma formula, the other end of the phone rang out the clear and generous voice of the third sister, "Kid, why are you looking for me?" Third sister, Elena Rivers cautiously opened her mouth, thinking about how to say it without scaring her third sister to death. Before she could think of it, the third sister burst out laughing, "Ha ha ha, I didn't expect, you actually begged me at times. Humph, when you usually oppose me, why don't you call me third sister? It's funny, I don't have time to worry about your money, go find someone else yourself. Husband, let's play another game." Contact was cut off again. Elena Rivers gritted her teeth. "Is this really your sister? Normally, we talk very well, our sisters are deeply in love, but in the end, no one can help us with something. Although the four sisters are weak and cowardly, they will definitely not be like the other sisters." Elena Rivers quickly recited the magic spell, the weak voice of her fourth sister rang out, "Fifth sister, save me, husband, save my life." Then there was the chaotic sound of gunfire. Elena Rivers awkwardly cut off contact. It seemed like the four sisters were a bit unable to take care of themselves. What to do now? There is no one to ask. What to do now? This is so big. Tears fell uncontrollably. Elena Rivers was originally an optimistic person, but this matter had completely exceeded her understanding, causing her to panic and not know what to do. "Why are you crying? Did I hurt you?" A concerned voice rang out next to her. Elena Rivers screamed in fear and fell onto the bed. Maxwell Gray's face was cold, his eyes were hard to hide his concern, looking at the woman with only a small head exposed on the edge of the bed, reaching out her hand, "Come up here." Elena Rivers snorted and pulled her head back, biting her lip to try to calm herself. Tears are like broken pearls, the rope keeps falling down. What should I do now? If my sister and grandmother knew, she would definitely be locked in hell for the rest of her life and never be able to get out. In the past, she did not like to practice, always focused on the prosperity of the human world. When her sister and grandmother did not pay attention, she would secretly leave the underworld and play around in the human world. Then he was caught by his angry sister and locked up for several months. Before, it was just a small matter, this time, she really violated the demon world's big taboo and had a relationship with humans. What now, what now, what now? She will definitely be burned to ashes by her grandmother using samadhi true fire. While feeling sorry for myself, suddenly a wave of warmth enveloped me. Maxwell Gray didn't know when he got out of bed, wrapped her tightly in a silk blanket, and carefully carried her to the bed. "You rest first, I'm going to take a shower." Maxwell Gray laid her down, covering her carefully with a blanket. Turning around to go into the bathroom, the sound of water was soon heard. Elena Rivers bit her lip and looked at the bathroom, clutching her rapidly pounding chest, wondering what was going on. Propping herself up to sit up, being treated so gently by Maxwell Gray, a strange and complex emotion arose in her heart. Can't differentiate, can't say clearly. But her panicked mood just now calmed down a bit. Although she was the smartest among the sisters, her EQ was the lowest. On weekdays, although she appears fierce and has the appearance of a queen, once she encounters something related to love, she immediately turns into a fool. "I don't know how to handle it, I can only choose to run away." Carefully glanced at the bathroom, the sound of water still hadn't stopped. With long slender fingers chanting the magic formula, the clothes were automatically put on. Taking another look at the bathroom, Elena Rivers gritted her teeth and turned into a green light that disappeared on the spot. Waiting for Maxwell Gray to finish showering and come out, there was no trace of the beautiful woman on the messy bed, only a lonely bracelet remained, lying on the pillow. Maxwell Gray wrapped himself in a towel and searched the whole VIP room, but couldn't find anyone. Only then did he confirm that she was gone. His cold face darkened. Maxwell Gray took out his phone and dialed a number, "Bring me a set of clean clothes here, and also find a woman named Elena Rivers, I want to know her news immediately." News. Hanging up the phone, Maxwell Gray stared at the bed, a bright red patch clearly told him that the woman was still a virgin. No wonder she cried so pitifully, she really wasn't gentle enough just now. Elena Rivers ran all the way to the underworld, rolled around and hid in her room, not daring to move. Trembling for a long time, my grandmother and Yen Wang did not come, not even a little ghost. Hiding in the blanket and trembling for a while, the reason in my head began to move quickly, and a small thought also appeared in my heart. Could it be that they don't know about this? If she doesn't say it, no one will know. However, Mrs. and Yen Wang's teachings are profound, there's no way they can't figure it out. Moreover, the human world has the eyes and ears of the underworld. Although they are assigned to protect people, they cannot help but have people monitoring their every move. Elena Rivers frowned, wondering what was going on. She clearly remembered that when the incident happened, she used the method of determination to communicate with her sisters. The eldest sister was calling her husband, the third sister was calling her husband, and even the fourth sister was calling her husband. Although the second sister didn't call anyone, that voice was clear. Even though they accepted the same mission, because of a mistake that night when she practiced, she stayed in the underworld to recuperate for 10 days. Could it be that this mission has some hidden meaning that she doesn't know about? Opening the blanket, Elena Rivers decided to find Mengpa to ask clearly. The task was assigned by her, naturally she knew it. While running to Mengpo's lost boy, Elena Rivers stopped in front of the door. Hesitating for a moment, gritted his teeth and walked in Vong Tin Trey's barrier. "Grandma, Grandma," as soon as she entered the room, Elena Rivers loudly called out, "Where are you? You're already 1,000 years old, why are you still so hasty? What will you do if you get married later?" The lady with white hair and black clothes came out of the inner hall, holding in her hands the firewood she had just finished chopping. In the main hall, a large cauldron was lit, and black water was boiling in the cauldron. "That is Vong Shuyan water, drink one sip and you can forget all the past." There are also people who are stubborn and whose love is so heavy that they need to take 7 or 49 bowls of Vong Shuyan water, cook 7 or 49 hours, and get just one drop of its essence to drink. Elena Rivers walked past the cauldron, stepped forward to take the firewood from Meng Po's hand, added 2 pieces of firewood under the cauldron, turned around and said to Meng Po, "What are you talking about? I'm a lover, how can I take husband?" Meng Po gently patted her head, his expression kind. "This girl, she already has a husband and wife, it's considered married." "Ah!" Elena Rivers cried out, biting her burned finger and sucking in air. "You know, why don't you take care of me? Is the rule that lovers cannot love each other fake? You're not careful at all. Come here quickly so I can see how you're injured." Meng Po worriedly pulled her injured finger, looking at the red and swollen blister, she couldn't bear it. "Grandma, do you already know everything?" Elena Rivers was a little afraid to look at her face, bowing her head like a child who had done something wrong. Meng Po gently blew a breath on the back of her burning hand. "This is a burn from Sanmu true fire, I'm afraid it won't heal in a short time." Having finished speaking, she let go of Elena Rivers' hand, stood up, went to the corner of the palace, and took down 2 exquisitely carved boxes. "This is the gift that Yen Wang and I prepared for you 2 sisters. Your sisters have all received it. This part is yours." Meng Po gave the box to Elena Rivers, looking at her affectionately. "In the future, when you travel in this world, you must be careful of yourself. Grandma and Yen Wang cannot take care of you forever. Even if the road ahead is difficult either way, you can only face it yourself." "The road ahead is difficult?" Elena Rivers repeated softly, not knowing what she was feeling. "Grandma, why did you send us to protect those people? Reincarnation of cause and effect." Meng Po sighed and patted her head again. "Even though you are smart, but your heart is simple, you will definitely have to endure a lot of hardships in the future." Elena Rivers frowned. Why now the more she heard what her grandmother said, the less she understood it. "Okay, that's all I can say. This time sending you guys is truly a difficult destiny. You and that person have had a cruel fate that has entangled you for many lifetimes." Meng Po held a large ladle and slowly stirred the Vong Shuyan water in the pot. "Later, you will naturally understand." Elena Rivers wanted to say something, but she opened her mouth several times but couldn't make a sound. "Elena Rivers, in the future you must be careful in everything you do, don't be hasty. You are the youngest among the sisters, and are also the child that your grandmother and Yen Wang worry about the most. You are simple-minded, and aggressive. In the future you absolutely must not use magic arbitrarily when walking in this world." Meng Po's eyes were a little teary, looking at Elena Rivers' face. His heart couldn't bear it. "If you feel resentful and miss your grandmother and Yen Wang, then go back to the underworld to visit." She couldn't say any more. Harsh fate that lasts for several lifetimes is already the greatest punishment for them. But the fate of heaven is determined, it cannot be escaped, everything can only rely on your own creation. As if sensing Meng Po's heavy heart, Elena Rivers rarely stopped asking. She just quietly hugged Meng Po, letting the thoughts swirl in her heart. "This trip, it seemed like I understood something, but it seemed like I didn't understand anything. However, in the end, a burden was lifted from my heart. What is the mandate of heaven, and what has it ultimately determined?" Leaving the underworld, Elena Rivers went to the 10 halls to hand over the captured devil to Yen Wang, saying a series of sweet words. After being advised by Yen Wang for a while, she crossed the boundary between yin and yang and returned to the human world. Elena Rivers has an apartment in the human world. This time she flew straight to the living room. Just as she stood firm, she was startled by a loud knock on the door. One day in the human world is equal to 1 hour in the underworld. This trip of hers took 3 hours to go back and forth. In human terms, it was already 3 days later. Elena Rivers was stunned. Although she was the most wandering person in the world, she had never made friends, so who would look for her? Putting down the box, Elena Rivers suspiciously went to open the door. As soon as the door opened, with just one glance, she screamed in horror, then slammed the door again. Outside the door, Maxwell Gray rubbed his almost crushed nose, his face dark. "Why did you come here? What did you come for?" Elena Rivers leaned against the door, pacing nervously. This damned human being dared to take advantage of her being knocked unconscious by a thunderbolt to ruin her innocence, and she was ordered to protect him and not harm him. "I'm going to die of frustration, I'm going to die of frustration, I'm going to die of frustration." Elena Rivers raised her face to the sky and screamed. Outside the door, Maxwell Gray was still knocking on the door frantically, constantly poking her nerves. "Knock, knock, knock, why are you knocking? I don't know you, why are you knocking on my door?" Forced to the limit, Elena Rivers suddenly opened the door and roared at Maxwell Gray. Maxwell Gray frowned, his face turned a little colder. This woman dared to say she didn't know him. Does she know how much effort and relationships he spent to find her from the vast sea of people? Waiting outside the door for 3 days, knocking on the door for 3 days, still no one responded. He couldn't find any other way to contact her, nor did he know if anything had happened to her. "But every time I knock on the door, no matter how hard I use it, I can't open it." The management board also did not have a way to contact her. Calling a locksmith to come again was not able to open this lock. Even tricks like blowing it up were used, but it was useless. These 3 days seemed to have made him experience all the emotions of life. Worry, insecure, confused, burning inside. Unexpectedly, he waited miserably for 3 days, knocking on the door until his arm was about to break. It was so difficult for her to open the door, but she said such ungrateful words. Although, at first when he saw her open the door, he did feel a sigh of relief. But this may represent nothing, it represents nothing. With Maxwell Gray's identity and appearance, what kind of woman wouldn't proactively rush into his heart? She once climbed into his bed despite everything, why is she pretending to act like this now? Is it a trick to attract his attention? Unfortunately, he didn't fall for the trick. If it weren't for the first time giving her face, the moment she ran away, he would have automatically erased this woman from his memory. There would be no need to waste so much thought on finding someone. Flit. Coldly throwing down a sentence, Maxwell Gray crossed his arms and leaned against the door. Behind, several black-shirt men rushed in, regardless of how Elena Rivers stopped them, and arbitrarily packed up her belongings. "Hey hey hey, what are you guys doing? Let go, don't touch my things." Elena Rivers sometimes pulls this person, sometimes pushes that person. Turning around a few times, she discovered that these people didn't even bother to glance at her, let alone listen to her. Anger rising, Elena Rivers strode a few steps to the door, glared at the paralyzed man and shouted, "Hey, are you crazy? This is my house, my house. Why do you come here? Hands and feet, why do you tell me to clean the house?" Maxwell Gray's face was solemn. This woman's thin blue dress was really too thin, unable to cover her graceful figure at all. He took off his coat and put it on her, holding tightly her hands that were trying to resist. "You are my woman now, naturally you have to live with me." As soon as she finished speaking, Elena Rivers immediately became angry. This man is either too confident or too arrogant, yet he still has the face to come here and say she is his woman. So angry that she burst into laughter, Elena Rivers also coldly looked at Maxwell Gray and gently opened her mouth. "I didn't expect Mr. Gray to not even be able to play, to go back on his word like that, truly the nature of a cunning businessman." Maxwell Gray is the general director of Ton Dien Tuk Engip, a person with billions of assets, a dragon among humans. When has he been mocked to his face like that? Raising his eyebrows, Maxwell Gray said calmly, even if it's just a joke, I should still pay you. As he spoke, he was about to take the checkbook out of his pocket. He only reached halfway when he suddenly remembered that the vest was on Elena Rivers' body, and suddenly put his hand into Elena Rivers' arms. Elena Rivers on this side was already furious by Maxwell Gray's words. This damn man actually dared to mock her as selling, and now Maxwell Gray openly reached out to her, even feel free to touch it. I really can't stand it anymore. Pop. Elena Rivers raised her hand and gave Maxwell Gray a deafening slap. Red-eyed and roared, this shameless, low-class guy. If you don't tell me, I still forgot. Didn't I forget to pay for sleeping with you? I'll get it for you now. Having finished speaking, she turned around, searched in the TV cabinet drawer in the living room for a bank card, walked to the door and threw it at Maxwell Gray's face. There are 50,000 in this card, the password is written on the back. This form of you is only worth this much. With that said, she kicked Maxwell Gray out the door, then slammed the door shut. Turning around to see the men in the house with wide eyes, Elena Rivers got angry and kicked each man out. Open the door, take one person in each hand and throw it out. Even if you can't use magic, dealing with these mortals is still as easy as turning your hand. It all happened in just a few minutes. Maxwell Gray was stunned the moment he was beaten, then before he could react, Elena Rivers kicked him out the door. By the time he realized how much he had been humiliated, his bodyguards had already been thrown out by Elena Rivers. Maxwell Gray's face was cold, his whole body emitted a cold aura, causing the bodyguards to fall left and right next to him in silence, not daring to breathe loudly. Useless bastards. Maxwell Gray glared at the thick door, gritted his teeth and scolded, then turned around and left angrily. He will not let this matter go. This woman dares to offend him, she must bear his wrath. The bodyguards silently followed behind, with Maxwell Gray leaving in a miserable manner. In the living room, Elena Rivers plopped down on the floor, waiting until she was sure Maxwell Gray had really left before breathing a sigh of relief. She really didn't understand what had happened. Inexplicably sent to protect a mortal. It's hard to understand why I lost my relationship with this mortal. Next, I heard a bunch of confusing words about the destiny of heaven. Returning to the human world and having to face such an incomprehensible person. Elena Rivers felt that even if she had another head, it wouldn't be enough, so she simply ignored it, lying on her back on the floor, staring at the crystal chandelier on the ceiling. The sisters don't know who each other's guardians are, and they don't even know what time and space each other lives in. The universe is vast, made up of countless independent and parallel spacetimes, inhabited by countless mortals. As for hell, it is where the souls of countless mortals return after birth, old age, sickness, and death. Based on their performance during their lifetime, managed by Yen Wang, they are either reincarnated, or fall into the animal world, or ascend to immortality, to continue to develop in time and space. As for the three realms of demon, fairy and demon, it is an existence that transcends the mundane world, far away from the human world and the underworld. The 5 Elena Rivers sisters are considered different species, clearly born as demons, and living in the underworld. This is a phenomenon that has never appeared since ancient times, even the Jade Emperor, Buddha, cannot explain it. They did not rely on transcending tribulation to complete their cultivation, but instead relied on the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the underworld souls as the essence of cultivation. In less than 1,000 years, their cultivation level has surpassed countless monsters who have practiced for thousands of years. Sigh. What's the meaning of this? Elena Rivers sighed, closed her eyes, and decided to ignore these troubles. Closing her eyes for a while, she fell asleep. When I woke up, it was dark. Elena Rivers rubbed her hungry stomach and made gurgling noises. She walked around the house a few times, but couldn't find anything to eat. She is a demon. In the underworld, she only needs to eat a little bit of the 7 emotions and 6 desires excreted by the soul after drinking Vong Shuyan water, but in the human world, she must follow the rules of the human world. She only has to eat rice to not feel hungry. Even if she stole the emotions of mortals, it wouldn't make her hunger any less. Thinking about this regulation, Elena Rivers has a headache. She knows everything, she just doesn't know how to cook. In this situation, the only option is to venture out to find food. Luckily, Maxwell Gray was gone, so she wasn't afraid to go out. Just as I was about to go out, my big sister's worried voice suddenly rang out in my heart. "Fifth sister, there's a snake spirit running into your time and space. You have to be careful." Elena Rivers paused and was about to speak, but the communication on the other side was cut off. "Big sister, when did you get this busy? It seems that among the sisters, she is the only one who is the most idle. I don't know if he was wearing the bracelet when she left that day or not." Elena Rivers gritted her teeth. Why should she care about him? Let him be killed by a monster. Pulling the door to go out, Elena Rivers added 2 more layers of barrier outside the door, then left satisfied. Now, let alone a mortal, even a fairy, it's unlikely he could barge into her house. Elena Rivers has a lively personality and quickly forgets the past. In addition to frequently traveling in the human world, one should know many things in the human world. This house of hers, when she stayed in this world for a month, was discovered by a scout. She accidentally signed an agency contract and received a generous amount of agency money to buy it. The house is in the central area, there are many delicious foods around. When buying, Elena Rivers targeted this place because there was a lot of food. Although after returning, he was scolded by his grandmother and Yen Wang to the point that his ears were about to become calloused. As demons, they should not leave traces of their lives in the human world. But that time, Yen Wang still didn't do anything to her. Now that I think about it, I'm afraid I already knew that one day she would live in this world. Finding a Western restaurant, Elena Rivers sat down to order, resting her chin and drinking juice. Many of the single men's eyes in the restaurant focused on her when she walked in. Elena Rivers was used to it, after all, every time she came to the human world to play, she was surrounded like that. While drinking juice and waiting boredly for food, suddenly the light above my head dimmed, and a gentle voice rang out above my head, "Miss Hay, I wonder if I can sit at the same table with you. There's really no more room left in the restaurant." Elena Rivers raised her head and glanced at a handsome face, then curled her lips and smiled, "Okay." The man sat down, intending to speak. After chatting for a few minutes, Elena Rivers didn't expect that as soon as Elena Rivers's steak was served, she shut her mouth. When enjoying delicious food, Elena Rivers usually doesn't talk. Knife aside, Elena Rivers raised her fork and stabbed it hard into the middle of the steak. The plate made a harsh noise, attracting many eyes. Elena Rivers ignored it. She was hungry right now, holding up the steak. Bite hard and eat until your mouth is full of grease. Soon, a piece of steak was in her stomach. Elena Rivers put down her fork, patted her belly and sighed, "Ah, finally alive again." With a poof sound in front of her, Elena Rivers raised her head and looked up, only to see the elegant man from before elegantly holding a knife and fork, his eyes looking at her again full of interest, the corners of his lips still showing a teasing smile. Thinking of the laughter just emitted by him, Elena Rivers frowned. Eating is eating, what's there to laugh about? The man didn't seem to expect Elena Rivers to be so calm, his eyes and eyebrows were full of laughter. He put down the knife and fork, took a napkin, bent down and gently wiped the sauce from the corner of her mouth. Elena Rivers squirmed slightly, but didn't really dodge. "I wonder how to address you, miss." After the man finished wiping, he sat down, raised the glass of red wine next to him and took a sip. "This is Richard Quinn, nice to meet you, ma'am." "My name is Elena Rivers, thank you." Elena Rivers smiled frankly, pointing to the corner of her lips. Bang! A corner of the restaurant heard the sound of hitting the table. Elena Rivers looked at the sound. There was a private seat over there, covered by a large potted plant, making it impossible to see clearly. Miss Elena Rivers, so lovely. Richard Quinn seemed to think for a long time before finding such a word to describe it. After saying that, he himself burst into laughter. Elena Rivers only then discovered that the eyes of most people in the restaurant seemed to be intentionally or unintentionally looking towards her. Many people were even pointing. Tilting her head, she asked very seriously, "Am I so funny? Why are they all secretly laughing at me?" Richard Quinn's hand that was cutting the steak stopped and said gently, "The way Miss Elena Rivers eats steak is a bit, liberal, so." Elena Rivers wrinkled her small nose. "I'm just so hungry, eating small pieces like you, although it looks beautiful, but before I finish eating I will definitely starve to death." Eating is a fun thing, I believe. It's a piece of steak, it certainly hopes I can eat it quickly. Otherwise, it will hurt a lot if it's cut into pieces like that. Finally, add a sentence, "I eat like that, I feel very happy." He nodded repeatedly, showing that what he said was true. Richard Quinn was stunned, then laughed again. This woman, so interesting. Honest, straightforward, pure, optimistic. Compared to today's fake and effeminate women, honesty is rare. Richard Quinn thought so, couldn't help but look at Elena Rivers a few more times, also learned from Elena Rivers's eating style just now, used a fork to spear the last piece of steak, and ate it in large bites. Certainly not bad. Elena Rivers covered her mouth and giggled, her phoenix eyes under the sparkling crystal light, pointing at Richard Quinn and saying, "This way of eating, it's really not pretty." Saying that, she took a spoonful of the dessert that the waiter had just brought, put it in her mouth. The corners of her eyes and eyebrows were filled with emotion. The eyes of many people around were attracted to their table. Richard Quinn even felt that from the direction of the noise just now, there was a hot gaze staring at him. If looks could kill, Richard Quinn believes he would be dead right now. I wonder what Miss Elena Rivers does. This is my business card, please teach me more. Richard Quinn took out a business card from his pocket and gave it to Elena Rivers with both hands. Elena Rivers took it and glanced at it, her expression unchanged. When Richard Quinn saw it, he silently applauded in his heart. After knowing his identity, the woman who could act so calmly was the first. "Don't open your mouth, miss, just call me Elena Rivers." Mortals don't like the word miss, I know it's a bad word. Elena Rivers ate tiramisu in front of her and spoke very seriously. "Mortal?" Richard Quinn repeated incredulously, causing Elena Rivers to almost swallow a piece of cake into her nose. "That. I mean, you big city people, that's right, it's you big city people." Elena Rivers laughed, her eyes rolling around. "I come from a very remote place, and I'm still not used to the way people talk here." Richard Quinn nodded, perhaps he was too sensitive. But if people who knew Elena Rivers were present, they would immediately realize that she was feeling guilty. Seeing that he didn't say anything, afraid that he would get suspicious again, Elena Rivers raised her voice, "Anyway, you can't call me that anymore. I'm not a lady." "Why do you call me lady?" "Calling me grandma will make you think you're too young." This is the second time she has come to this time and space, it seems like she will definitely have to be a little more careful in the future. "Sorry, I was rude." Richard Quinn quickly apologized, holding the wine glass forward. "I'll drink a glass of wine as an apology, I hope Elena Rivers won't be angry." Having finished speaking, he drank all the remaining red wine in the glass. Elena Rivers immediately smiled brightly, picked up her glass of juice and took 2 strong sips. So lucky, so lucky. Finally managed to steer the story in another direction. "Elena Rivers still hasn't told me, what do you do?" Seeing Elena Rivers smiling again, Richard Quinn also breathed a sigh of relief. Actually, this was the first time he had feelings for a girl. At first sight when entering the restaurant, he saw her sitting alone at the table, leisurely drinking juice. Curious eyes looking around, radiant demeanor. With just that one glance, Richard Quinn's heart was beating at an unbelievable speed. Love at first sight, can't believe he got it. Elena Rivers fiddled with the straw, looking a bit absent-minded. Master told me to protect someone, but that person is so hateful, I don't want to protect him anymore. So, I don't know what to do next. What to do? Because Master doesn't seem to want me to go back right now. Richard Quinn's heart sank, a little painful. Do you want to come and be my secretary? Our company is short of a secretary. Richard Quinn blurted out, after saying that he felt a little regretful, afraid of offending the beautiful woman, so he quickly put out the fire. Sorry, I don't have anything else to say, it's just that our company is short of people, so I wanted to ask you. Do you want to do it? Elena Rivers frowned, not understanding what a secretary was. Looking at Richard Quinn's expectant expression, he seemed to really hope that she would come to be his secretary. Is it so difficult? I've never done it before, I don't know if I can do it. Elena Rivers spoke up cautiously. Not difficult, very simple. Richard Quinn said quickly, wanting to take the opportunity to keep her. A cold voice suddenly sounded next to him. I didn't expect that Quinn would notice my assistant and openly dig the corner right here. Elena Rivers raised her head and saw Maxwell Gray's entire body radiating cold air, his cold face smiling as if not looking at her. Immediately he coldly snorted, turned his head away without looking at him, and used a spoon to poke the tiramisu in the bowl. It turned out to be Mr. Gray. What a coincidence. Richard Quinn quickly stood up, smiled and shook hands with Maxwell Gray. So Elena Rivers is President Gray's assistant. Look at me, I'm so confused, I really don't know. I hope President Gray doesn't blame me. Nonsense. Elena Rivers stomped her foot. Why did she have to meet this hateful guy everywhere? I'm not his fucking assistant, I don't know him at all. Richard Quinn looked embarrassed, but quickly thought in his heart. Looking at Elena Rivers' reaction, it would be impossible not to know Maxwell Gray. On the contrary, it is very possible that this Maxwell Gray is the person she just said she wanted to protect, but didn't want to protect. If that's really the case, it seems that Elena Rivers really hates Maxwell Gray. So, you still have a chance. Quinn is making fun of you. You're angry at me. Maxwell Gray leisurely sat down, looking at Elena Rivers with a loving expression. This look is completely conveying to Richard Quinn that his relationship with Elena Rivers is not ordinary. Richard Quinn didn't believe it, and Maxwell Gray naturally knew he didn't believe it. They are all old foxes running around in the marketplace, who wouldn't investigate their opponents' backgrounds clearly. Come on, stop being angry. Maxwell Gray pulled Elena Rivers' small hand into his palm, his eyes full of tenderness. I was rude that night, I'm sorry, please forgive me. As soon as she heard him mention that night, Elena Rivers' beautiful white face immediately turned red and steamed. The hand that was trying to pull away also stopped, being held tightly by Maxwell Gray. Richard Quinn is really cunning. Looking at Elena Rivers' appearance, he knew that Maxwell Gray was telling the truth. Although my heart was bitter, I still couldn't bear to give up the person of my dreams that was difficult to meet, so I straightened my face and sat down. It's just a matter of love for a couple to quarrel every now and then. Gray always has such a beauty in his hands, so why should he be involved with other women unknown? No wonder Elena Rivers is angry with him. The tone was very reluctant, carrying an unwilling jealousy. After Richard Quinn finished speaking, his eyes also looked towards the seductive woman walking this way. Elena Rivers' face turned pale, her eyes also saw the woman under the light smiling provocatively at her. Although her EQ is not high, this kind of provocative eyes are really too much, it's hard not to understand. Angrily withdrawing her hand, Elena Rivers raised her hand and was slapped again. Maxwell Gray, you bastard. After fighting, I felt a little heartbroken. This heartache came in an inexplicable way. Without looking at him again, Elena Rivers stood up, kicked off her high heels and ran away quickly. After running a few steps, I turned around and saw Maxwell Gray standing up with a black face. Quickly snapping his fingers, a point of light shot out, hitting Maxwell Gray's calf. Maxwell Gray was slapped twice by Elena Rivers in one day. His already angry mood because she talked and laughed with another man became even more angry. His cold eyes swept around, glaring at all the eyes. Curious. Seeing Elena Rivers running away, she stood up and wanted to chase, but unexpectedly her right leg became weak and she fell down. Richard Quinn saw a good play. Now that the play had ended, he naturally should go. Patting Maxwell Gray on the shoulder, Richard Quinn said slightly, "Gray, please take good care of yourself." Leaving Maxwell Gray with a black face sitting on the chair, gnashing his teeth in hatred, he personally followed the beauty's footsteps and hurried to comfort her. "Take out your phone, quickly dial a number, watch her closely." The woman accompanying Maxwell Gray wanted to help him again, but Maxwell Gray shook her hand and fell to the ground. Sparkling eyes looked at Maxwell Gray, looking like he wanted to cry. Before he could do enough, the person stood up, turned around and left. Elena Rivers ran very fast, with some intention of escaping. If the documents in your hand are not fake, Maxwell Gray is not an easy person to mess with. Right now he might be thinking of a way to tear you to pieces. Today she actually slapped him twice. Even though there was a reason, she was still a little confused. That guy Maxwell Gray has money and power, but she can't use magic casually in the human world. If she really confronts her, I'm afraid she'll suffer a lot. The task at hand is still to quickly escape, take refuge and then figure it out. While driving hard, the car horn sounded from behind. Elena Rivers stopped walking and turned around to look, then saw Richard Quinn driving all the way and chasing after her. Only then did she remember, how can two legs run as fast as four wheels? Standing there dejectedly, Elena Rivers even wanted to fly home directly. But in broad daylight, how dare she? Richard Quinn stopped the car next to Elena Rivers, got out of the car, pulled her, pushed her into the passenger seat, fastened her seatbelt, then went to the driver's seat, sat down, started the car and sped away. "What's up? Regret it?" Richard Quinn saw that Elena Rivers was stunned and couldn't help but open his mouth to tease. Elena Rivers nodded her small head and said sadly, "I'm just an ordinary person, how can I compete with rich and powerful people?" Richard Quinn laughed, breathing a sigh of relief. He thought Elena Rivers regretted hitting Maxwell Gray, because of regret. But the truth is that she regrets hitting Maxwell Gray, because she is afraid of retaliation. Same reason, but different cause, enough to make him angry. Just on his face, he still maintained his usual gentle expression. Unlike Maxwell Gray's cold and decisive appearance, Richard Quinn is a calm and leisurely person. Under his gentle and polite exterior, he actually hides the ability to hold everything in moderation, making people unpredictable. His thoughts. "Don't be afraid, I will be your support." Richard Quinn replied casually, half true and half false. But Elena Rivers couldn't hear it, after all she still didn't understand humanity. "Forget it, the lady who sent me there said that Maxwell Gray is a man who is not easy to tease, so tell me to be a little more careful of him." Elena Rivers pouted, not at all happy about Richard Quinn's words. "You don't believe me?" Richard Quinn raised his eyebrows and asked faintly. Elena Rivers bowed her head and played with her fingers. "No, you and I don't know each other." Richard Quinn laughed. This woman, so straightforward and lovely, is also truly heartbreaking. Looks like he's smart and resourceful, how come he doesn't understand human situations like that? As if realizing that she had said something wrong, Elena Rivers smiled apologetically and turned her head to look at the night scene outside the window in bewilderment. Richard Quinn did not bother, seeing that she had no intention of opening her mouth anymore. He had to speak up himself. "My name is Richard Quinn, 30 years old this year, General Director of Hong Duong Group. Sundry assets combined, probably worth several trillion. Sorry I didn't calculate specifically, so I don't know clearly." Because I'm engrossed in my career, I'm 30 years old and still haven't officially fallen in love. Although my girlfriend already had 2 people, one was because of my money, the other criticized me for not being able to love her wholeheartedly, and in the end they both broke up. Likes to eat clean and frugal food, likes to drink Lafite and brandy wine, likes to travel, play golf, likes to swim and jog. No bad habits, strong body, no disease. There are 3 villas in this city, and a number of other real estate properties. After saying these things, Richard Quinn glanced at Elena Rivers, discovered that she was listening attentively, and smiled. Okay, these are considered my basic information. With that in mind, we already know each other, right? Elena Rivers was made fun of by him, turned away to cover her smile, looking so innocent and pure. Don't worry, I said I'll be your support, I'll make sure you can rely on it, absolutely don't vote in the middle of the road. Elena Rivers was still laughing until tears flowed from her eyes. Stop it, I see your body is not strong, I better not bother you. Raising his eyebrows slightly, Richard Quinn also knew he couldn't be too rude, so he casually said, then give me a contact method. If you need help in the future, just come find me. Elena Rivers was stunned. After 2 or 3 seconds, she spoke absent-mindedly. What method of contact? Of course the one you use often, such as your cell phone number, home phone number, or emergency contact number. Every time Richard Quinn said something, Elena Rivers shook her head, until Richard Quinn finally suspected that she had any relationship with Maxwell Gray, and Maxwell Gray couldn't buy her a phone. Just as he passed the intersection, Richard Quinn turned the car around and ran toward the phone store. Arriving at the phone counter, Richard Quinn directly took the latest one and gave it to Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers held it in her hand and turned it back and forth, just as she was about to open her mouth, when a dark shadow covered the top of her head. A low voice rang out, "You really had fun." Hearing this voice, Elena Rivers' first reaction was to turn around and run away, as quickly as possible. As soon as he turned around, he encountered a warm chest, his waist was hugged tightly. Another gentle voice rang out, "Gray's speed is really fast, I'm about to take Elena Rivers home." Maxwell Gray frowned, his face could not be darker, his eyes glanced around his hand holding Elena Rivers' waist, and after a long time suppressed his anger. He said, "Don't bother Quinn. Richard Quinn feels that today is enough, the days are long and the months are wide. In order to avoid making a bad impression in Elena Rivers' eyes, he should still stop at the right time. So, he smiled faintly, a peaceful look. If that's the case, Quinn, I'll take my leave." Grabbing Elena Rivers' shoulder, smiling gently, Richard Quinn gently comforted, "I'll go first, don't be afraid. If anything happens, call me, my number is already saved there." After speaking, she pointed to the phone Elena Rivers was holding in her hand and gently stroked her hair. Richard Quinn said, "Let's go." Elena Rivers instinctively took 2 steps forward, wanting to follow. Someone grabbed her wrist. Elena Rivers turned her head, saw Maxwell Gray's watery face, and sighed in her heart. Knowing that, just let that demon continue to cling to him, clinging to him until death is even better. Why should I help him exorcise the evil spirit? It's a waste of effort, not to mention it, but I'm also paying for it. Follow me. Maxwell Gray's face was cold and he pulled Elena Rivers out of the phone store. Elena Rivers did not speak, nor struggled, completely indifferent, letting him pull her away. It wasn't until Maxwell Gray stuffed her into the car, and then he groped her all over, that Elena Rivers reacted. Both hands pressed tightly against Maxwell Gray's chest, trying to push him away, Phoenix eyes looking at him angrily. "Maxwell Gray, what are you doing? Do you?" Maxwell Gray's face turned black, wanting to press him down. In a moment of danger, Elena Rivers bent her knees and aggressively hit Maxwell Gray in a dangerous place. Maxwell Gray was in so much pain that his senses were distorted and his body curled up. Elena Rivers took the opportunity to crawl away from him, cowered in a corner of the car, drew a barrier in the blink of an eye, squatted inside without moving, just coldly looking at Maxwell Gray. Recovering from the pain, Maxwell Gray's eyes flashed coldly, his whole body emitted a terrifying breath, and aggressively rushed towards Elena Rivers. As if hitting an invisible wall, Maxwell Gray rushed forward, but not only could he not touch half a strand of Elena Rivers' hair, but he also bounced back, falling face down into the back seat. Looking strange, Maxwell Gray looked at Elena Rivers with dark eyes. Elena Rivers remained calm, holding her knees with both hands, resting her head on it, staring at him. The corners of his lips curled into a mocking smile, his pink lips slightly opened. "You scared me." The Phoenix's eyes blinked slightly, revealing a hurt look. Maxwell Gray frowned. "If you believe Elena Rivers, then 20 years of your life will be a waste. What did you do?" The voice was cold, carrying a question. Elena Rivers pouted, glanced at him contemptuously, looked away, and replied indifferently, "I'm just a weak woman, what can I do to a big man like you?" Maxwell Gray said nothing, seemingly thinking. Silent for half a minute, Maxwell Gray reached out tentatively to Elena Rivers. "No, that invisible wall is still there." "Who are you anyway?" Maxwell Gray was angry. Although the volume was not loud, the aura he spoke was very scary. Elena Rivers became even calmer, winking mischievously, letting her wavy hair loose. 10 fingers spread out, trembling voice like a devil, "I am a devil, not a human." Maxwell Gray was angry, but couldn't explain what that invisible wall was. Elena Rivers is still acting like a monster, just moving back and forth, seemingly only within that range. After a long while, seeing that Maxwell Gray did not react, Elena Rivers also stopped her childish actions. "Bend your legs and hug your knees," looking out the window in bewilderment. Maxwell Gray couldn't get through, Elena Rivers didn't get out, and the car compartment suddenly fell into a strange silence, leaving only the sound of the car speeding by. While thinking about how to disappear in front of this troublesome guy, completely escape his entanglements, Elena Rivers suddenly heard third sister's voice in her heart, carrying unprecedented anxiety. "Fifth sister, come here quickly, something big has happened to big sister." Elena Rivers was startled and sat up straight. "What's wrong, big sister?" "Big sister has been possessed by an evil spirit. Come and join forces with us to force out the evil demon in big sister's body." "Big sister." Elena Rivers trembled her lips and called out. When evil spirits enter the body, if the light is mild, the cultivation level will be destroyed, if the severity is severe, the soul will disperse and fall into the demonic path. "I'll be right there." Elena Rivers replied in her heart, her fingers in a place no one could see, continuously chanting the spell. At this moment, she was in front of Maxwell Gray. She could not disappear in midair, she could only appear in her soul. Hopefully doing so won't scare him to death. Out of the soul, the body is equivalent to an empty shell. In addition to normal breathing, it will fall into a state of unconsciousness, until the soul returns to wake up. Seeing Elena Rivers sitting up straight, looking slightly worried, Maxwell Gray asked, "What's wrong?" Not receiving an answer, Maxwell Gray was about to get angry when he suddenly saw Elena Rivers close her eyes and her body slowly softened. The moment Elena Rivers came out of her soul, her body lost its support and fell down. His face also turned dark blue, like someone who was seriously ill. It's just that right now she was in a hurry to save her sister, so she didn't have time to turn around and worry about whether something would happen to her body. Maxwell Gray picked up Elena Rivers' limp body and shook her a few times. "Hey, hey, hey. Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers, wake up, Elena Rivers. Martin Finch, to the hospital, quickly." The driver saw the boss's worried expression in the rearview mirror, startled and almost choked on his own saliva. "My broken-faced boss seems to care a lot about this girl," Martin Finch thought, immediately turned the car around, stepped on the accelerator at full speed, and sped towards the best hospital in the city. Any kind of cold fine is no longer important now, human life comes first. As soon as Elena Rivers came out of her soul, she used a positioning spell between sisters, then contacted second sister to use teleportation magic to take her there. When we arrived, all the sisters were present. Second sister Vivian March is using magic to block the heart and spiritual consciousness of big sister Ruby Reed, to avoid having her mind taken over by evil spirits. Third sister Amber Kane and fourth sister Celeste Lane gathered around, talking to a handsome but haggard-looking man. Elena Rivers walked over, grabbed Amber Kane's hand and asked, "What's going on? Big sister's cultivation is so high, what kind of evil spirit can penetrate big sister's body?" Amber Kane said nothing, just glared at the other man. Next to Celeste Lane, she spoke up to explain, and at the same time introduced, "This is our big sister Adrian Locke. In order to save him, big sister became like this." "Big brother?" Elena Rivers was frightened, pulled Celeste Lane aside and whispered, "So you know we are." Celeste Lane nodded, was silent for a few seconds, then bit her lip and said, "He is a peeling demon master." Elena Rivers held her forehead, "What is this? A monster, yet found a peeling demon master as her husband. That's it after all, why did big sister find a peeling demon master?" "Shut up." Vivian March finished casting her magic and coldly interrupted Elena Rivers, "Now is not the time to pay attention to this matter. Big sister can't resist much longer. This evil demon has very high power." After speaking, he glanced at Elena Rivers, frowned, and advised, "Be careful." Elena Rivers nodded. She also knew that using the exorcism spell was very dangerous in her spirit state. But the urgent situation at hand did not allow her to think too much. Everyone looked at each other and sat cross-legged around Ruby Reed. With both hands forming seals, chanting incantations with their mouths, for mists of different colors slowly radiated from the four people's bodies. The mist met in the air, forming a circle, covering Ruby Reed inside. The primordial chaos, all things become one. Reveal the birth spell, eliminate evil talismans. The four principles are one, calm the mind and eliminate evil. The four people closed their eyes, held their breath, and recited the incantation word by word. Bean-sized drops of sweat rolled down the four people's foreheads, each person's face showed pain, especially Elena Rivers in her spirit state, it was even more strenuous, and also the most painful. Next to Adrian Locke, he was alert and focused on protecting them. Her worried eyes occasionally looked towards Ruby Reed who was surrounded by four people, her eyes flashing with both concern and disgust. Black gas carrying a strong fishy smell gradually seeped out from Ruby Reed's body, becoming more and more abundant, but lingering around and refusing to disappear. The four people seemed to sense something, gritting their teeth and increasing their strength. Seeing that the black gas was about to be completely expelled, he did not expect a white light to fall from the sky and hit Elena Rivers straight in the chest. Elena Rivers was concentrating on casting magic, not knowing the white light was coming. Although Adrian Locke intended to block it, he couldn't keep up with the speed of the white light. Taking this blow, Elena Rivers's strength was destroyed and she directly spit out a mouthful of blood. Elena Rivers was injured, the other three were shaken, and a trace of blood oozed from the corner of her lips. The black energy also took advantage of the four people's weakened strength and flooded back quite a bit. The situation is critical. If the black energy reacts at this time, Ruby Reed will definitely not be able to escape the danger of her primordial spirit dissipating. Thinking of this, Elena Rivers could only grit her teeth and try again to resist. A large hand was placed on Elena's back. Rivers, pure power passed through her back. Elena Rivers immediately felt the pressure ease and became even more excited. The halo of light revolved around Ruby Reed for 72,000 cycles, finally forcing all the black energy out of Ruby Reed's body. Adrian Locke saw that and took out the demon gourd. With both hands forming a Dharma seal, reciting an obscure verse, pointing the mouth of the gourd towards the black energy, sucking all of it into the gourd. The evil spirits were all expelled. Ruby Reed slowly opened her eyes, her weak voice called out, "Sister." Vivian March, Tram Yuyan and Celeste Lane immediately rushed forward. Vivian March hugged Ruby Reed, Celeste Lane and Tram Yuyan surrounded her. Elena Rivers also wanted to go there, but just now she was so seriously injured that she couldn't support the condensed primordial spirit at this time. Using her last bit of spirit, Elena Rivers softly called out, "Big sister." After calling, it slowly turned into a green light and disappeared on the spot. She also didn't know what happened after that. Martin Finch stepped on the accelerator all the way and finally stopped the car in front of the hospital emergency room before the boss got angry. Maxwell Gray seemed crazy as he hugged the unconscious Elena Rivers, not knowing how many people he bumped into all the way, only worrying about shouting, "Doctor, doctor." The nurse on duty came to take him to the emergency room. Someone had already informed the doctor to come. Maxwell Gray was politely invited out by several nurses. "Excuse me, we need to examine the patient, please come outside first." Maxwell Gray's face darkened, but he also knew that staying here would only cause more trouble. He angrily walked out of the emergency room, stood outside the glass window and walked back and forth, watching the doctor use all kinds of tools on Elena Rivers. "The patient's blood pressure is very low, the heart rate is very abnormal," a nurse, after completing the examination, reported to her post. "Prepare for electric shock," the doctor in a white coat and mask, instructed the nurse next to him. "First time, prepare," the doctor raised the electric shock device and pressed it hard on Elena Rivers' chest. Elena Rivers was electrocuted and jumped up, still unresponsive. The doctor was preparing to give instructions a second time, but as a result, Elena Rivers suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, staining the white bed sheet on her chest red, as well as the doctor's white blouse. Maxwell Gray saw clearly outside the window. The moment Elena Rivers spit out blood, he only felt as if his heart was being squeezed by something, the pain was so much that he had to bend down. Doctors and nurses in the emergency room were all frightened. They had never seen a patient spit blood after being electrocuted. "Doctor, the patient's indicators are decreasing, the situation is even more dangerous," the nurse who was always monitoring the indicators on the machine suddenly exclaimed. The doctor in white coat immediately turned pale. "Meters. Prepare for heart injection." The doctor in the white coat gave orders again, and the nurse next to him prepared heart medication and gave it to the doctor. The nurse next to her disinfected Elena Rivers' arm and stepped aside to make room. Boom! The door of the emergency room was kicked open, and the man came out as if from hell, trying to suppress his anger, standing at the door with a gloomy face. The man's aura was too strong, the syringe in the doctor's hand fell to the ground in panic, and a cowardly nurse directly knocked over the tray of instruments next to him. "Fuck off." Maxwell Gray used all his strength to restrain himself from directly going forward and breaking that doctor's neck. Originally, Elena Rivers was just in a coma, but when he treated her, she started spitting blood. Her bright, smiling face was now as white as a sheet of paper. Even from afar, Maxwell Gray could still feel her faint heartbeat. It must be said that this remaining heartbeat saved the lives of these people. "Young master," the driver followed behind and called out, "Miss Elena Rivers is very dangerous right now, if you kick the doctor out." "Call Owen, quickly," Maxwell Gray commanded in a low voice. Martin Finch saw his lips trembling non-stop, even his facial muscles kept trembling. "It can be seen that your young master is very scared right now." His eyes turned towards the girl lying in a coma on the hospital bed. That fresh young face could not really be called a woman. Martin Finch's expression was very complicated. "But in the end still don't say anything, go out and make a phone call." Cold eyes swept over, all the doctors and nurses were silent. "Get out." I don't want to say it a third time, so reasonable people should immediately leave. Luckily, the people here are quite reasonable, like seeing a ghost, running for their lives. Slowly approaching the hospital bed, that bright red color stabbed into Maxwell Gray's nerves. He reached out his hand, but when he was almost touching Elena Rivers's pale cheek, he stopped and trembled and withdrew his hand. Maxwell Gray covered his eyes, hot tears pouring out of the corners of his eyes, almost burning his palms. God knows, when he saw Elena Rivers spitting blood, how scared he was. The feeling of being surrounded by cold and gloom in that moment made him unconsciously tremble from the inside. Since when did Elena Rivers become so important to him? Drying his tears, Maxwell Gray sat down next to the bed, hugged Elena Rivers's upper body, and traced her features with 5 fingers, feeling a strange familiarity in his heart. It seemed like they had known each other for a long time. Elena Rivers, wake up. Maxwell Gray is not a person who easily softens. Even though he knows in his heart that he cares for Elena Rivers, his words still carry a bit of severity. As if responding to his words, the eyes that were tightly closed suddenly trembled slightly, the long eyelashes moved, slowly opening. Elena Rivers woke up and found herself half lying on Maxwell Gray's lap. What caught her eye was his exaggerated handsome face. His 5 senses were still cold, and there wasn't much concern in his eyes. Just for some reason, Elena Rivers felt that the lines on his face seemed a lot softer, unlike the coldness before. Glancing at the bright red blood stains on the bed sheet, as well as the surrounding environment, Elena Rivers roughly understood what had happened. This guy thought she suddenly fainted, so he took her to the hospital. Just in time, she encountered a quack who gave her an electric shock. When she tried to expel evil spirits from Ruby Reed, a white light hit her, most likely an electric shock. Elena Rivers smiled bitterly. This guy, whether accidentally or intentionally, would not leave her in peace. Seeing that she still had the strength to laugh, Maxwell Gray was a little relieved and coldly opened his mouth. Are you awake? Elena Rivers nodded, tried to sit up with her hands, but was pushed down by Maxwell Gray. Is your body made of clay? The factory quality is so poor. It was clearly a mockery, but Elena Rivers heard a hint of concern and couldn't help but curl her lips. If you say it again, you almost killed me this time. Thinking for a moment, he added, if you encounter this situation next time, just find me a bed to lie on, otherwise I really don't know how you will kill me. However, there will be no next time. Maxwell Gray raised his eyebrows. Is this unreasonable? Somewhat annoyed, he threw her on the bed. Maxwell Gray stood up, walked to the bedside, lit a cigarette, nonchalantly took a breath, turned his head and glanced at her. Looks like he's not dead yet. Elena Rivers rubbed her elbow that hurt from being thrown, and her chest hurt slightly from the concussion. She angrily responded, You're dead, I'm not dead yet. After speaking, I felt funny again. I couldn't help but slightly raise the corner of my mouth and said in a low voice, Thank you. Maxwell Gray dusted off his cigarette but, not paying attention, I'm just afraid you'll die in my car, this will be on me again. Thinking that in the past, he had evil spirits clinging to him and harmed many girls. Although it was not directly related to him, he was more or less responsible. Elena Rivers frowned, thought for a moment, still biting her lip and opening her mouth. In the future, when discussing business, you should leave room for yourself. Maxwell Gray was surprised. This woman knows me. Could it be that she intentionally approached? I approached you on purpose, but it's not what you think. I can't tell you the specific reason. Looking at his appearance, Elena Rivers could guess what he was thinking, so she decided to open her mouth to explain first. And whether you believe it or not, that's your business. Maxwell Gray turned around, saw Elena Rivers with a tired look on her face, and walked over helping her lie down, while covering herself with a blanket. A security guard's voice came from the door and asked, Mr. Donez. Here. Maxwell Gray covered Elena Rivers with a blanket, smoothed her slightly messy hair, and then turned around. Let him in. Elena Rivers raised her head, wondering which kind of god this Mr. Don was. I just saw a teenager wearing a blue cotton t-shirt, sitting in a wheelchair, being pushed in. Elena Rivers frowned. The young man looked very handsome, his features were gentle, but he looked like a woman. It's just that, looking at your appearance, it's a short-lived appearance. Usually, people with short lifespans have a special talent, which is considered heaven's compensation for this person. It seems that the advantage of this young man is his medical skills. Sure enough, the guard wearing a black vest pushed someone next to the hospital bed, and Maxwell Gray automatically gave up his seat. The teenager placed 2 fingers on Elena Rivers's pulse. After a moment, he said, in doubt. "What's wrong?" Maxwell Gray leaned his head closer and asked very coldly. The teenager looked towards Elena Rivers, only to see the beauty with a pair of long, narrow phoenix eyes staring at his face, slightly unsatisfied, and raised his eyebrows. "You have internal injuries, damage to your lungs, and need to be nursed. The burn on the back of your hand is a bit severe. If you don't treat it well, I'm afraid it will fester." After the young man finished speaking, he lowered his head, looking very tired. The security guard behind him came to push him out, apparently going to get medicine for Elena Rivers. Maxwell Gray glared, raised his eyebrows at Elena Rivers. The beauty smiled seductively, but a bit mournfully. "I was electrocuted by you. I was fine, but seriously injured." Maxwell Gray is angry. But it was inconvenient to get angry, so he just aggressively pushed the cigarette butt into the ashtray. Not long after, the teenager returned. The security guard behind him had a tray of medicine and gauze in his hand, placed on the table across the hospital bed. The teenager didn't seem to have the strength to do it himself. He just stood next to the security commander, applying medicine and bandaging Elena Rivers. Maxwell Gray stood with his arms crossed from beginning to end, not saying a word. Elena Rivers also rarely speaks. If she is injured without taking medicine or bandaging, she really cannot speak. Anyway, back to when I was alone, it was okay to throw these things away. As for the other teenager, Elena Rivers was very interested in him. "What's your name?" The teenager and Maxwell Gray raised their heads at the same time, but Elena Rivers still stared at the teenager's face, as if a flower bloomed there. Maxwell Gray followed Elena Rivers' eyes, his cold eyes filled with a hint of discomfort. The teenager seemed to be very disgusted with this kind of conversation. He only glanced at Elena Rivers contemptuously and bowed his head without speaking. Elena Rivers didn't care too much, still smiling as brightly as before. "From now on, I'll rarely bother to examine other people. If I can endure it, maybe I can live past 30 years old." The teenager suddenly raised his head, Maxwell Gray's sharp gaze fixed on Elena Rivers' face. She remained calm, just smiling at the teenager, her eyes carrying Buddha-like pity. "It has nothing to do with you," the teenager coldly replied, lowering his head, not knowing what he was thinking. Maxwell Gray moved his lips, wanting to ask something, but didn't know how to ask, so he just remained silent. Vivian March's voice echoed in her heart, saying Ruby Reed was okay, telling her to rest assured. Elena Rivers smiled gently, then felt tired all over her body, closed her eyes and fell asleep. "I woke up and the sky was bright." Elena Rivers opened her eyes and discovered she was lying in a place that was both strange and familiar. Speaking strangely, it's because Elena Rivers has never been here. It's familiar because Elena Rivers once saw this place through the Huyn Quang mirror. It was after she finished recovering from her injuries that she first approached Maxwell Gray and saw him bringing a woman to this room. After clouds and rain, the woman quickly withered, eventually disappearing into ash. At that time, Elena Rivers knew that Maxwell Gray was possessed by an evil spirit, so she searched for an opportunity for 3 days to subdue that evil spirit. "Actually, I want to subdue an evil spirit, with my cultivation level hers, it can be said that it is as easy as turning your hand. But because the evil spirit clings to the human body, if it is not forced out before taking action, the possessed person will also be injured. Her mission is to protect Maxwell Gray, naturally she cannot let him get hurt. So it took a lot of effort, and in the end, she had to sacrifice her beauty, only to leave Maxwell Gray unharmed. Who would have thought that you would be so resentful?" Thinking of this, Elena Rivers felt a little unhappy and scolded Maxwell Gray a few words in her heart. "Wait until your mood calms down a bit, then lift the blanket off the bed. The original thin green gauze dress had been replaced with a white silk nightgown. Elena Rivers was unhappy. She snapped her fingers and wanted to cast magic to turn her favorite green color, but her body remained helpless. Haven't recovered yet, can't use force, can't help it. Looking down from the window, there is a large lawn. Not far away there is a small hill with a few trees planted on it and a few round rocks. This is Maxwell Gray's villa on the outskirts of the city, a very large golf course villa area. His villa is located in a central location, has a good view, and the scenery is also good. Elena Rivers admired the scenery for a while, feeling that mortals really know how to spend money. According to her understanding of this time and space, such a villa must be at least more than 10 million. Elena Rivers pouted and shook her head, what a wasteful person. Unlike ghosts in the underworld, no matter how high the position is, no matter how many benefits, there is no place in the underworld to spend money. In the underworld, in addition to the palaces of the 10 Yen Wang palaces, there are also Meng Po's Forgetfulness Pavilion and their Tonlin Pavilion, and other places where ghosts and monsters can move around at will. Moreover, the expenses in the underworld are all paid for by the fairy world, so you don't have to spend a penny of your own. The underworld landscape is still very beautiful, bright red spider lily flowers bloom all year round. Everywhere are pavilions and small bridges with flowing water. Not much less than the fairy world, it is a rare landscape in the three worlds. Unlike ordinary people, although the scenery is beautiful, it requires spending money. To buy a house you have to spend money, to buy clothes you have to spend money, to eat meals you have to spend money, to go out and ride a car you have to spend money. It can be said that in the human world, there is no place where you don't need to spend money. Elena Rivers doesn't understand why there are still so many people who earnestly want to continue reincarnating as humans, it's clearly so hard. She didn't know how many souls she had heard waiting in line to drink Mengpa soup lamenting to her, how hard it is to be a human, how difficult it is. As a result, after drinking Mengpa soup, you happily reincarnated. Hey, that's how people are. Maxwell Gray had just walked in when he saw Elena Rivers leaning against the window and sighing. His handsome eyebrows frowned slightly, what are you sighing for? Exclaiming the suffering of humanity. Elena Rivers turned around and saw that the person coming was Maxwell Gray. She answered honestly and advised, so in the future, you should spend your money in moderation and save a little. Do good deeds to help others, by the way, find me a blue outfit, I'm not used to wearing this color. Maxwell Gray glanced at her and said blandly, if you want to save money, just wear it temporarily. Elena Rivers suddenly became speechless, took a few deep breaths before feeling her chest no longer hurt. Come down for breakfast. Maxwell Gray finished speaking, didn't even turn around and left. Behind her, Elena Rivers tried her best to ask a question, do you have black truffle cake? Maxwell Gray's reply echoed, saving is everything. Elena Rivers wanted to bite her tongue off, knowing that she wouldn't open her mouth. But when she went downstairs and saw black truffle cake on the dining table, she immediately smiled happily. The food in the underworld is not as delicious as on earth, especially sweets. The sweets in the underworld are not sweet at all, unlike those in the human world, which are sweet to the heart. Having delicious food, Elena Rivers's mood clearly improved. Even when Maxwell Gray asked her to eat the main food first and then eat black truffle cake, she broke the rule and did not argue back. Elena Rivers' rare docility made Maxwell Gray feel satisfied and his expression softened. After breakfast, Elena Rivers was enjoying black truffle cake when the phone rang. At first, Elena Rivers did not pay attention. She was not used to using phones, and the underworld did not have this device, so she did not have a natural reaction when she heard the ringing. It wasn't until Maxwell Gray glared at her many times that she remembered that Richard Quinn had given her a phone last night. Picking up the phone, Richard Quinn's warm voice rang out, Elena Rivers, have you thought carefully about being my secretary? Mr. Quinn really spares no effort in attracting people. Unfortunately, I have no intention of letting her leave yet. Because the first time she used the phone, Elena Rivers accidentally pressed the speakerphone button, so Richard Quinn's words echoed throughout the dining room. Maxwell Gray's face darkened, his gentle features suddenly stiffened. Without waiting for Elena Rivers to answer, he responded. Elena Rivers rubbed her forehead. This is only her 4th day living in the human world, why can't everyone leave her in peace for a bit? Elena Rivers thought maybe she should say something to reconcile, then heard Richard Quinn laugh cheerfully, seemingly unconcerned, replying, when will Mr. Gray become Elena Rivers' representative? I haven't heard you yet. If he refuses, I will not give up. Yes, that's right, what right does he have to decide for her? Elena Rivers thought to herself and couldn't help but nod slightly. Maxwell Gray saw Elena Rivers nodding and immediately knew she was thinking something bad. I'm afraid Mr. Quinn will be disappointed. Maxwell Gray pretended to be polite, but his voice was cold. Unfortunately, the first time she used the phone, Elena Rivers mistakenly pressed the speaker, so Richard Quinn's voice echoed throughout the dining room. Maxwell Gray's face turned black, his gentle face immediately stiffened. Without waiting for Elena Rivers to say anything, he responded. Elena Rivers rubbed her forehead. This is only her 4th day living in the human world, why can't things go smoothly? She thought about saying something to ease the situation, when she heard Richard Quinn laugh loudly on the other end of the line, seemingly paying no attention and replying, when did Gray Total become Elena Rivers' representative? I haven't heard Elena Rivers refuse directly, so I won't give up easily. That's right, that's exactly how it should be. On what basis do you represent me to answer? Elena Rivers silently criticized in her heart, but still couldn't help but nodded. Maxwell Gray saw Elena Rivers shaking her head and nodding and knew she didn't have any good intentions. I'm just afraid we'll disappoint the manager. Maxwell Gray pretended to be polite, but his tone was different, especially cold. The other party laughed lightly, chatted a few more words with Maxwell Gray and then finally hung up machine. As soon as the call ended, Maxwell Gray stared at him with dark eyes on Elena Rivers, making her no longer in the mood to eat cake. What are you looking at? You've never seen a beautiful woman before. Elena Rivers gritted her teeth. Shove a spoonful of cake into your mouth. Is it just you? Maxwell Gray was indifferent, bowing his head and continuing to read the newspaper in his hand. Elena Rivers took a deep breath, trying to restrain herself from throwing black truffles in her face. Wasting is a shame, but wasting on someone like him is even more despicable. After eating the cake, seeing that Maxwell Gray had no intention of leaving, Elena Rivers gritted her teeth a few times, finally had to speak up, aren't you still going to work? No need to make money anymore, star. Do you care about me? This time, Elena Rivers couldn't help herself, pushed her chair up, and was about to walk out the door. But go halfway through, she realized she was still wearing her pajamas. She stopped, turned around. Where are my clothes? Give it back to me, I want to go home. Maxwell Gray glanced at her, then calmly turned to the new page of the newspaper. Upstairs there is dressing room, go and choose your own outfit. From today, you will come to work with me. I'm not going. Elena Rivers gritted her teeth and climbed upstairs. As soon as she opened the dressing room door, she began to admire human luxury again. Who life has a dressing room larger than a bedroom, and there are thousands of suits to wear. One set a day won't last a whole year. And that's just the men's clothing. On the side on the left, and on the right are all diverse women's clothes, from sports to streetwear, from formal at home or party. Elena Rivers scrolled from beginning to end, finally finding a dress green. Simple cotton dress with thin straps. After changing clothes, Elena Rivers calculated whether she should fly straight back or not. After a while, after pondering, she still decided to ignore it. There was only one exit in the villa. If she suddenly disappeared into thin air, lest people would suspect that they had encountered a ghost. There was no other way. Elena Rivers just hoped she could hesitate enough. Maxwell Gray got impatient and let her go, so she could quietly slip home. When she stuck her head out onto the stairs for the 5th time, Maxwell Gray finally gave up okay but looked up from the newspaper. After you're done changing, come down here. Why are you hesitating, forever? Hearing him say that, Elena Rivers' anger flared up. There are many people in this world arrogant, but I've never seen anyone so arrogant. Who do you think you are? Why do you give me orders? He told me to come to the company. I have to go. Do you think I'm a soft, easy-to-squeeze persimmon? Elena Rivers rolled up her sleeves, but realized he didn't have sleeves to roll up, so he embarrassedly let his arms fall. I tell you, I'm not going anywhere. I want to go home. See who can stop me. Having finished speaking, she boldly walked out the door, with an aura as if she wanted to destroy God's and Buddha's road. Maxwell Gray just coldly watched, saw her open the door, rush out, and then disappear your vision. The black-shirted bodyguard at the door walked in and respectfully bowed his head. Mr. General Director, there is a need. Are you ready for the car? Maxwell Gray glanced at his watch. He had an important meeting at 10 o'clock, no could be wasting more time. He put away the newspaper and stood up. Let someone follow her, prepare the car. The bodyguard bowed and left. Maxwell Gray went upstairs to change clothes. 10 minutes later, when Maxwell Gray was getting ready to go downstairs, the bodyguard returned with a look alarmed. What's going on? Maxwell Gray frowned, having a hunch that it had something to do with Elena Rivers. Dear General Director, I've lost track of her. The 8 people following her were all defeated by her run out of. The bodyguard realized that he was at fault and bowed his head very low. Maxwell Gray snorted coldly and nodded faintly. Rolling up his shirt sleeves, he left the house to come meeting. This stray cat, just let her be free for a while. When she's done, I'll take her back. In the car, Maxwell Gray flipped through the documents that would be used in the meeting. Driver Martin Finch glanced at his boss's gloomy face, moved his lips to say something, but didn't dare, just quietly drive away. The car had just left the villa area, and Maxwell Gray was attentively looking at documents. Suddenly, a sharp brake hit him on the back of the front seat, causing documents to fall everywhere. Toss. What's up? Martin Finch is a long-time driver. He doesn't believe he was at fault while driving. Boss, a girl just jumped out in front of the car, I think. I was. A bodyguard quickly got out of the car to check the situation, and after a while reported, Sir General Manager, there is indeed a girl lying in front of the car, looking injured. Call an ambulance. Martin Finch, drive. Maxwell Gray told the bodyguard and then urged the driver. Help, help me. A weak cry for help reached Maxwell Gray's ears, for some reason made him waver a bit. Okay, get her in the car. The bodyguard quickly took the girl to the car. Maxwell Gray glanced at her and saw that she was wrong. He was seriously injured, so he coldly ordered, go to the hospital. Martin Finch stepped on the accelerator. The car sped toward the hospital. Maxwell Gray didn't notice that, under the cuff of his vest, was a bracelet Elena Rivers left behind was emitting a pale blue light. When taking the girl to the hospital, Maxwell Gray left a bodyguard to watch and then returned company meeting. The meeting was scheduled to end after 2 hours, but a situation arose suddenly, lasting for 7 hours. Just after the meeting ended, Maxwell Gray received a call from his bodyguard, informing him that the girl was there. The hospital woke up and wanted to see him and ask if he was going. Maxwell Gray coldly said when she refused, the bodyguard gave her some money to send her away. Then he led people to his residence. Elena Rivers, planning to take you back. This morning, after Elena Rivers defeated the men Maxwell Gray sent after her, she flew straight to the underworld. Her wound, if she were to nurse in the underworld, would recover much faster. As soon as she entered the underworld, Elena Rivers immediately ran to the palace of Muoi Dain Yen Wan. Breaking the barrier at the door, she rushed in. Elder Yen, Grandpa Min, where are you? While calling and searching, she finally heard a faint response from the sea of flowers in the backyard. Tan's granddaughter is back. I can tell by her voice that she's injured again. Come here quickly, let's see. The silver-haired old man stood up from among the spider lily flowers. wearing a black robe he contrasts with the bright red color of the flowers, creating a magical and eerie look. His long beard twisted into many loops around his legs. Grandpa. Elena Rivers felt warm inside, her eyes turned red. Silly girl, why are you crying? No matter how serious the injury is, just come back here, Grandpa will heal you. The old man gently lifted his foot and in a blink of an eye was standing in front of her face, reached out to check her pulse, smiled and said, "Luckily, it's okay, take the pill. Hey, the pain will be gone in about 10 minutes. Elena Rivers took the pill from the old man, obediently thanked her and swallowed it. Sitting cross-legged in a sea of flowers to recuperate, the old man stood next to him holding a small shovel. Fertilize and take care of flowers. 10 minutes later, Elena Rivers opened her eyes, then ran after the old man to help him work. Elder Yen, why have there been so many demons and ghosts appearing in the world lately? Has something happened to heaven and earth? Elena Rivers asked casually. The old man, Yen Wang, was flipping stopped for a moment, then after covering the soil, he replied, "Why, I encountered it has. The evil spirit from last time was also strange, right?" Elena Rivers tilted her head, scratched her nails. The same goes for the eldest sister being possessed by an evil spirit. Before she was possessed, she even told me that there is a snake demon that has run into my time and space to cause trouble. I just haven't met it yet. Yen Wang smiled kindly and patted her head. This girl likes to think nonsense all day long. Just a few little demons, the thousands of years of morality of you two sisters. I have enough to deal with. What are you worried about? Elena Rivers pouted. Who cares about themselves? I'm afraid that heaven and earth will lose balance, and when that happens, the underworld will be in danger. Just as she was about to say more, a blue light flashed before her eyes. Elena Rivers quickly said, "Grandpa, I'll go first, a monster has appeared." As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly ran away, naturally not seeing a worried look on her face. Yen Wang wanted to say it again. Flying all the way to the suburbs, she sensed that Maxwell Gray seemed to have left the demon. Thinking about her worries just now, she couldn't help but feel annoyed. What's the point of worrying about that bastard? It's better to let him get wrapped up in a monster and not have to face his dead face anymore. She lost face, just waited for him to come and beg her, then come back. Thinking like that, she landed in the suburban park, leisurely walking into the city, thinking about Ruby Reed saying there was a snake demon. She escaped here. She has always been afraid of snakes. Just one look at that slimy thing is enough to make her nauseous for half a month. How should she deal with it? Big sister, big sister. Elena Rivers used mind-to-mind communication to ask Ruby Reed for help. What exactly is the origin of that snake spirit? You know, I've always been afraid of snakes, so. That snake has been cultivating in Tuvan Mountain for 1,700 years, destroying many creatures, so its magic is quite advanced. It's an emergency. I can't help you, otherwise it will cause chaos in time and space. Fifth sister, I'm afraid this time, I'll have to personally exorcise your husband's snake demon. Being seriously injured by Adrian Locke, it's easy for me to get rid of it now. If I wait for it to recover, I'm afraid it will take a lot of effort. Elena Rivers sighed. She was most afraid of snakes. This was a snake that had been cultivated for 1,700 years, I don't know how big it was. Just thinking about the snake's movement, Elena Rivers got goosebumps and felt like her whole body was covered in cold sweat. Big sister, can't you really help me? Rarely showing weakness, always strong people also carry a bit of a crying voice. The other end of the phone was silent for a while, then said for a long time, it seems that 2 is in the same space and time as you. If he comes to help you, it is not considered a violation of the rules of time and space. Please contact Tuesday. I'll try it. Elena Rivers cut off contact, sighed and sighed again, looking for 4 sisters. That coward like a mouse is afraid that when that time comes, she will run faster than herself. Well, anyway, that snake demon in this time and space has not done evil, so she can't find an excuse to get rid of the demon. Just let him be free for a few days, wait for evidence of him doing evil, then get rid of him. Returning to the safety of her nest, Elena Rivers first took a comfortable bath, bathing until her bones were soft. The world is so comfortable, this bath essential oil is both fragrant and smooth, and can calm the mind. Hell, there has never been such a good thing. After showering, I slept soundly, and didn't wake up hungry until late at night. Elena Rivers opened her eyes, the sound of her stomach gurgling almost deafening her ears. Wearily got up, thinking there was nothing to eat in the house, so I could only slowly pack up and prepare to go out to find food. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Maxwell Gray leaning against the door, silently waiting. You. Elena Rivers was just about to ask him why he was here, but was interrupted by Maxwell Gray coldly, Go. After speaking, he reached out his hand to pull her, turned around and left. Elena Rivers did not move, her phoenix eyes glanced, carefully observing Maxwell Gray. There was indeed a faint demonic aura on his body. It seemed that the snake demon had once found him. Just, why come to him? First it was an evil spirit, then a snake demon. Listening to your grandmother's tone, I'm afraid there will be demons and ghosts coming in the future. After all, why? Clearly, there had never been such a big movement in the human world before. Maybe it's because of you. Maxwell Gray turned his head and saw Elena Rivers staring at his face, not moving. Tilting his head, he seemed to be thinking about something. What's up? Maxwell Gray asked calmly, his expression very cold. Elena Rivers withdrew her thoughts and pouted lips replied, I'm hungry, I can't walk anymore. The tall man stopped, let go of Elena Rivers' hand, looked at her carefully, and slowly walked forward. Come on. Elena Rivers was stunned, looking at the man squatting in front of her, temporarily not knowing how to react. His back looks very large, as if leaning on it there is nothing to fear, so trustworthy and solid. A similar scene seemed to flash in my mind. In the middle of a sea of flying flowers, there was a person, squatting deep in the sea of flowers. Behind him, was a woman's dress fluttering, her ink-black hair flying with the wind, tangerine curls in the wind. The woman was very beautiful, so beautiful that even though she was used to hearing compliments, Elena Rivers could not find the right words to describe her beauty. But although the woman is beautiful, she carries an indescribable demonic aura. Her tall black horns stand up in the middle of her black hair, expressing her demonic status. The image suddenly flashed and disappeared, so quickly that Elena Rivers thought she was hallucinating. Lately, these strange scenes have been flashing in my mind. She had clearly never seen it before, but it was strangely imprinted in her memory, as if she had known him for 1,000 years. Lying face down on his back, Elena Rivers wrapped her arms tightly around his neck. What do you want to eat? Maxwell Gray carefully hugged her leg, stepped steadily, opened the staircase door, and asked as he walked. Whatever you want, just bring me back to life. Elena Rivers buried her head in his back, feeling reassured like never before. Why don't you take the elevator? Carry her. Maxwell Gray calmly replied, not saying anything else. Elena Rivers was thinking in her heart and was also especially silent. Until the two of them went downstairs and Maxwell Gray put her in the car, Elena Rivers was still lost in her thoughts. You. Elena Rivers looked at Maxwell Gray sitting in the car, moving his lips, but didn't know how to ask. Maxwell Gray closed the car door, turned to look at her. What do you want to ask? Nothing. Elena Rivers shook her head. What do you want to take me out to eat? French food. Maxwell Gray coldly replied, bowing his head to read the document. No longer disturbed by Maxwell Gray, Elena Rivers was happily quiet, curling her legs up in the corner. Maxwell Gray raised his head from his dispatch, glanced, paused for a few seconds, then bent down. What are you doing? Elena Rivers looked at him warily. Maxwell Gray pulled her seatbelt, then put her feet down and bowed his head again to look at the dispatch. Elena Rivers touched her nose, smiled awkwardly twice, and scratched the car window. Fully satisfied after the meal, Elena Rivers drank the juice and burped in satisfaction, finally alive again. Maxwell Gray heard that, smiled as if not smiling, and continued to bow his head to eat. From the beginning until now, I've only seen Elena Rivers acting alone, eating rice like the wind blows clouds away, only worrying about putting it in her mouth. Maxwell Gray was afraid she would accidentally choke to death. If you want to laugh then laugh, I'm not good looking. Elena Rivers didn't mind. Eating is not to look good, but to fill your stomach. Eating like you guys, no matter how delicious the food is, it will lose all the fun. Maxwell Gray stopped his hand skewering foie gras, the corner of his lips curled up into a smile, suddenly frowned, and rubbed his temples. Lately, I don't know what to do. I've been having frequent headaches. Every time I have a headache, some vague impressions appear in my head, both strange and familiar. Even though he was used to being a cold person, at this moment he couldn't help but show some doubts. What's wrong? Are you upset? Seeing him frown, Elena Rivers couldn't help but ask. Maxwell Gray shook his head. It's okay. People said it was okay. Elena Rivers didn't ask anymore, drank the last sip of juice, smacked her mouth. Okay, I'm full, let's go first. After speaking, he stood up and prepared to leave. Stop. Maxwell Gray raised his eyebrows, his eyes cold as ice. Doing what? Let's go. Putting down the tableware, Maxwell Gray took a sip of wine, stood up and pulled Elena Rivers to pay. Elena Rivers struggled twice, unable to escape, silently cursing in her heart. Knowing that, just now she ran a little faster, but now it's good, she was caught again. Eyes glanced around, remembered something, shook his hand. You should still go see the people at the hospital. As for me, you don't have to worry about it. Speak. Then he turned around and ran away. Maxwell Gray reached out his hand but couldn't catch it. Watching her back run away, deep in thought, a gentle smile appeared after a while. Elena Rivers walked out of the restaurant, found an empty corner, turned around and flew away. This place is quite far from where she lives. If I walk, I'm afraid I won't be able to reach it until tomorrow morning. Maxwell Gray went out. His subordinates came to report but lost track of him. Raise your eyebrows, don't blame too much. After all, that stray cat Elena Rivers was very slippery. His people followed her several times and lost track of her several times. Looks like this subordinate should change to a better team. Let's go home. After Maxwell Gray finished giving instructions, he got in the car. As soon as Martin Finch started it, a phone call came in. After listening, Maxwell Gray calmly said, "Go to the hospital." On the hospital bed, a woman with exquisite facial features lay quietly on the hospital bed, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling, not knowing what she was thinking. This appearance was like an angel abandoned by God, making people wonder. I have mercy. If I knew what she was thinking right now, I wouldn't think like that.